Welcome, everybody, to another episode, another week. I hope you've got your glasses out, poured, ready to go, ready to enjoy yet another episode of Wrestling with Whiskey Weekly. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show, to another week. We have survived, usually thanks to our whiskey. So everybody give a little round of applause to your own whiskey in your own closet, cabinet, bar, what have you. I hope you are all doing well. This is Wrestling with Whiskey Weekly. I am your host, Matt Raywalt. I used to wear tights for a living. Now I just drink whiskey. I wish for a living. And so I'm here with you. The best damn bourbon and whiskey show on the planet. Getting better all the time. I hope this week has found you well. Today, a historic day for those of us in the U.S. Thank you guys for sharing just a little bit of your time with me right here. And the whiskey. I know you're here for the whiskey, but if you get to hang out with me as a kind of a little consolation as well. So I appreciate you all being here. Lutaro, what's going on? Oriella's in the house. Wes, I think you might want to rephrase that. That's my dad, everybody. You might want to rephrase your opening comment. Scorpion, what's going on? DDT, no glass. Oh, you're earning your bourbon tonight. Sardog is in here as well. Eric, what's going on? A couple of our patrons in the house. Always exciting to see. Appreciate you guys being here. Exciting news on that front as well. Little business up front, as they like to say. The Wrestling with Whiskey Woodinville single barrel cast strength pick, which you saw us pick right on this channel live. This one took a little while, probably about 3.5 months back. Picked it with one of our patrons, Stephanie Jasic, live on air right here. That is finally coming into store, available to our patrons first and foremost. Patrons get a discount as well, so keep that in mind. It is coming up, so patrons get on that bottle. I got to get mine too, so it's going to be awesome. And we are getting ready to do our George Remus high rye bourbon pick. They're kind of going through the list, getting everybody taken care of. Hopefully by the end of this week, early next week, I'll be able to have samples of all the barrels that they have available, and I will get those out to our members. 2 members will be picking live on air with me. Oh yeah. And before we move any further, let's just because I can't throw it out there fast enough. This is our Wrestling with Whiskey Single Barrel Club. Just join the Barrel Club, tier 1 of our Patreon, $5 a month. You get to join in. You get to not only join our Discord where we have some awesome whiskey chatter. I'm not going to lie. You get to be part of the barrel picks. There's always a chance for you to pick live with me right here on air because not many of the distilleries are open. But if they are and we can go, you have a chance to be in on those picks. You get discounts on the barrel picks as well. Check out the website to see if you're in one of our states or if you have a mule. And then tier 2 is for people who just kind of want to put that extra support behind the show, behind the channel, and I appreciate that. I will give you social media shout outs on the Wrestling with Whiskey channel, on the Wrestling with Whiskey Instagram, and Twitter. I will also throw some out on the Drama King channels as well, and some of these people who you will see right here. Special thank you to our social media sipping patrons, Steph, Jason, Eric, Mark, and Travis. Those are their Instagram handles. Check them out. You will see them on future episodes, potentially, of this show dedicated to them because they're so awesome. So, speaking of those barrel picks, this Saturday we are going down to Cincinnati, Newport, Kentucky, technically, to New Riff to pick our Riffle Rumble pick. Yes, I have made the executive decision. This one will be called the Riffle Rumble. It is the week before the Royal Rumble, and I am going back to my WWE years and time and my wrestling background to name that one. Can't call it Whiskey Mania because that is a separate pick that I do with my friends from City Beat and my buddy Greg Hamilton, and we are doing that one again as well in March. That is a small, private, different thing, but maybe I'll be able to get some samples out to the Wrestling with Whiskey Single Barrel Club patrons. But this one will be the Riffle Rumble, and I have a feeling it's going to be just as good as the Whiskey Mania picks. They always pop out awesome things over at New Riff. So, and yeah, you can't, I don't know how many riff puns they've had. Oh my God, all the different groups are going out and doing their goofiest riff pun, their own riff on the word riff. So to each their own, you know what I mean? But today, ladies and gentlemen, we are traveling down to Tennessee. Today on the show, both in our opening contest and our main event, we have 2 Tennessee whiskeys. 2, I believe they're both considered Tennessee bourbons. So both are labeled as straight bourbon whiskeys. And our main event is absolutely, I don't know, the Uncle Nearest is not technically labeled as a bourbon. So, but an appropriate choice for today's historic day. We'll get more into that later. Um, Dresden question March Madness to I don't know. We kind of did it last year. I don't know. We could do different potential choices, but I think we kind of picked the core choices from each of the major brands. We could do a March Madness with craft distilleries potentially. That could be interesting. I'll get in touch with Greg Hamilton on that one. There's a lot to choose from. So instead of so last year, for those who don't know, we did do a little March Madness bracket with my buddy Greg Hamilton from WWE, big whiskey fan, lives in Cincinnati. And we took the major whiskey houses, kind of the brands. So like not just, Knob Creek, but like Jim Beam. So we included like Knob Creek. We included Booker's. We included Jim Beam, blah, blah, blah. And we pit them against themselves, and then the winners of those against each other, and we picked a winner. But it could be interesting to get into the craft game, because with the rise of so many craft distillers, especially now that so many craft distilleries have put out their own products, it could be very, very interesting. That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. Oh, yeah, we could do just bourbon. You could do just rye. You could do single malt. You could do American. There's probably enough brands to do American single malt by itself, Canadian. So we could do all kinds of things like that. I'm going to talk to good old Greg, and maybe we'll do a virtual, depending on where we are at in the world, a little virtual madness, if you will. Could be fun. Could be a lot of fun. But yes, today we are going to Tennessee. And so we all need a drink to start off with. So let's jump in to our opening contest. And so as you can see, I've been enjoying it. This is a $3.75. They had this actually at the little grocery store at the end of my block, which was pretty cool. This is Chattanooga Whiskey, right? Many of you know them. They've been kind of making their name known a little bit more, over the last few years. They were one of many craft distilleries who got some of that nice MGP stock, high rye, bourbon, and everything like that. And they were doing different things with it and different batches. And they've started coming out with their own product. And they are doing something. They're not just making regular Tennessee whiskey. They're not trying to copy Jack Daniels or Dickel or anything like that. Nope, they're doing what they call the first ever Tennessee high malt, which is something we've been seeing a lot more. And maybe a lot is a big word, but we've been seeing more of in whiskey. I've seen more malt. Still using, corn and rye and everything like that, but accenting with different kinds of malted barley or malted rye, so on. I don't think you can malt corn, but malting process on other grains other than just a little bit of malted barley at the end. There's a lot more play with that. We saw Rabbit Hole doing that. Again, we also tasted that on this channel. So it's very interesting. They're pretty good with their, what I like, they're pretty good with their, disclosing what's going on. And on the label, they straight up tell us, they don't tell you the exact numbers, but they let you know it's corn, malted rye, caramel malted barley, and honey malted barley. So lots of malt. You know what I mean? 3 different kinds of malted grain. It tells you a 7-day fermentation, 53-gallon barrels. So this, I know we actually had a chance here in Chicago, thanks to our friend Urban Bourbonist, Chris Blattner, set up a call with the founders of Chattanooga Whiskey. And I did think it was kind of interesting that they label it is straight bourbon whiskey. They've passed the legal rigor, but everything that they do with this mash bill and everything like that, technically, they age them in 53-gallon barrels, and then they dump them in batches into a giant Solera barrel That's a huge 4,000 gallon barrel. It is a wooden barrel, but it's a huge Solera barrel, and they let it age there for a little while as well. So it's technically finished. So, but on the front of the label, it does not say straight bourbon whiskey finished in a Solera barrel, right? It did technically, it wasn't a tank. It's not a stainless steel mixing tank. It technically entered a secondary barrel, and it doesn't say finished. It just says straight bourbon whiskey. Bourbon Truth might have something to say about that. I asked them about that, and they kind of just seemed casual about it. They seemed like, look, nobody's given them any pushback on it for the most part. And it's not a secondary barrel. It's not a wine barrel. There's nothing else has been aged in it other than whiskey. But it's still it's a very, very small, thin gray line, but it's a gray line nonetheless. So I think it is very interesting that it's not disclosed. But the bottle's very cute. The 750 is pretty much exactly like this. You see it over to my left over here. Your right, whatever. But the malt, and this is young. The age, they tell you an age, it's greater than 2 years, but if they're not saying 3 years, it means it's somewhere between 2 and 3 years. So this is 2.5 year bourbon. You know what I mean? And that is young for putting out a product these days. Most people on their bourbons are waiting for at least 3-4 years. Most people 4 or more. So to put at the young 2-year whiskeys I've had are not exactly what I wanted to have. But let's try it out. How did what go? Are you guys laughing at me? Did I say something funny? I probably did. So let's dive in. This is a 2.5 year malted rye, two kinds of malted barley, bourbon whiskey straight from Tennessee. It is not a Tennessee whiskey, so it does not go through the Lincoln County process. We'll get in a little bit into that more later with our main event. This is all distilled, aged, and bottled by Chattanooga Whiskey in Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you haven't been, it is a beautiful part of the country. Check it out. Cheers, everybody. And right off the bat, this is very mellow. Almost like it would have gone through the Lincoln County process. It's round. It is not grainy. I will say this, it is not grainy or harsh at all on the nose. It's like buttered popcorn, black pepper spices in there a little bit. It's round, kind of almost almondy, like nutty. Not like peanutty, like Jim Beam kind of style, but just like, I don't know how to say it without sounding ridiculous, but like nutty. Just nutty, okay? Just leave it alone. A little bit of oak on there and everything like that. It's very, very nice. Again, it's just for something less than 3 years old, it's very much not harsh. There's very little like straight up grain on there. That malted barley process, I think, changes things a lot. Let's taste. A little bit of heat there coming. I mean, it's only 91 proof, but it's a nice flavor on it. You know what I mean? Again, rounded corn, like again, popcorn is in there. It's not harsh grain notes at all. No. It's very, very pleasant. It's not overly layered. I would stop short of calling it one-dimensional, but it's like it hits only 1 or 2 notes, but they're very nice, especially for such a young bourbon. it's sweet. I'd be curious what the exact mash bill ratios are. There's almost like a vanilla bean in there too. Almost like a vanilla ice cream with some warm butter on it. That don't make a lick of sense. I know. But trust me, it's just like this round. There's a nice mouthfeel too. For 91 proof and only 2 years old, it ain't too shabby. Smooth caramel. I hate the word smooth, I know. But well-rounded, viscous, buttery kind of taste going on, for sure. Once again, Chattanooga, they're starting to do single barrels. They do a lot of experimentation too. That's kind of how they got to this recipes. They kept doing experimental barrels. Just like different maltings, different mash bills, different char types. And they just kept trying them, and then they would let them age for a little bit and then just tasted them and saw what stuck. And this was, I believe, barrel 91. So this was barrel 91 of their experimental. Eric's saying that the rye is really good. Oh, I'm sure. If they're doing the awesome things with the rye here, with the malted rye, I bet malted rye on its own would be excellent. Is it sold locally here in Chicago? Yes, it is. I mean, I can speak for Chicago. It is here in Chicago for sure. You can find it at Binny's. Pretty easily. I found it at the local store right down the street from me. So, Joe Smart, absolutely check it out. It's worth it. It's a fair price too for the full $750. I believe it's like $35. It's less than $40, which for a craft guy is pretty darn good. So, Chattanooga Whiskey, everybody. Ooh, give it a go. And we're going to go right on to the main event. Oh my God. Our main event, ladies and gentlemen. The main event of the show. Uncle Nearest 1856 Tennessee whiskey. I thought this was a really appropriate choice for today. Not to get too in the weeds on anything, but I figured on the day we have sworn in our first woman of color as vice president. I thought it would be very cool to highlight a whiskey that's not only telling the story of a person of color, a former slave, but now the brand that is creating this is owned by a black woman, a woman of color as well, which is a rare thing enough in and of itself, but in the whiskey business is especially rare. And I really wish it wasn't, and hopefully it becomes more of the norm in the future. So I thought this would be a really appropriate bottle for today. Historic day, hell of a history going behind Uncle Nearest, and not only history in the story of the brand, but like I said, in the history making of the company in modern day times. So let's get into it a little bit. So Uncle Nearest was a real person named Nearest Green. So Nearest Green was a slave. We don't know if he was born into slavery. That they're not sure of. But in the mid-1800s, he was on a plantation farm for Dan Cull, a preacher, grocer, and a distiller. And so Nearest started distilling on the property, on the farm, when Jack Daniel, whose real name I believe is Jasper or something like that, came to work on the farm. Not a rich white boy, but a young working class white boy who lost his parents, came to work on the farm as a farmhand. And so he saw all the smoke billowing out from the the far ends of the fields and was wondering what the hell that was. So the preacher introduced him to Nearest and said, teach this young boy everything you know about distilling. And it is said that the slaves, I don't know if it was Nearest Green himself, but the slaves were the kind of the first to introduce the Lincoln County process, because that's where this farm was, in Lincoln County. And the charcoal filtering was something said to have been brought over from Africa when slaves were being brought over, because this was something they would do to purify their drinking water or other things with tribes in Africa. So they are believed to have brought that whole process of filtering water and, of course, now whiskey with charcoal filtering. Jack Daniel went on to build the distilling business. Nearest Green retired, but his children and grandchildren went to work with Jack Daniel in what became Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey, and they kind of swept, either by choice or sheer, just forgetting it. The story of Nearest Green was kind of just lost to history until recently, when Fawn Weaver, an American businesswoman, brought back the story and brought the brand of Uncle Nearest back to the forefront. And they are in the process right now. They have built their own distillery. They want to tell the Nearest Green story. They want to tell the Tennessee Whiskey story, because it all came from this one slave. So that, I think, is a very, very cool story. And that'll bring us back to tasting this very cool bottle. They've got a couple different editions. They have the 1856, which is a premium whiskey, but this was, I believe, about $55. Not crazy. 100 proof. They do have a small batch, which is like 91 proof, for like $45. And I know they've had various special editions as well. So this one, again, not bourbon, technically. I mean, it's listed as premium whiskey. It's Tennessee whiskey. It doesn't say where it's from. Distilled and aged in Tennessee. I remember when this brand first came out, like so many people, I assumed if it's a Tennessee whiskey, speaking of what we talked about last week, that it was going to be Dickel, right? But lo and behold, do a little bit of research. Can't say what, but there's, because of NDAs and everything like that. But they work with 5 different distilleries to get whiskey for what they, for their initial batch of products. Like I said, the distillery has recently been built. They are laying down product of their own now, which will be filtered into their small batch products. But right now, they're still working with a few distilleries to source product, many of which they can't say. But like I said, I've always said, even if you sourcing should not be a dirty word, because so many things can happen once you source. If you continue to age it in your own warehouses and climate, that can change it. How you proof it, how you blend it, how you blend multiple sources together can make every bit of difference in whiskey. So please do not dismiss sourced whiskey as all being the same, because you never know, especially if it's from multiple sources. Ben in the chat has had the Uncle Nearest 1856. Really impressed after a week. Of course, yeah. You always want to maybe let a little picked this up today at Benny's here in Chicago. Like I said, about $55 off the shelf. Very easy to find here. They're getting out in the market pretty damn well. 100 proof, 50% alcohol by volume. Like I said, multiple sources for this whiskey. This is my first endeavor into Uncle Nearest anything. I love the story. Jeffrey Wright, if you've seen in any of the kind of marketing, stands behind this brand in a big way. And I think that's very cool, because I know he's a very principled actor and everything like that. I love his stuff for what it's worth. And I think it's very cool that he stands behind a brand like this. Sardog mentioned the blend is like 18. That I haven't seen in any of my kind of review today. I did not see anything about ages. I'm sure they have a lot of product from all over, so you might even see a little bit younger of that. Could see potentially more than that, but there's probably a little bit of everything in here. And off the bat, this is the 100 proof blend. Some like champagne grapes in there. There is a, you can tell there's a, I think there's definitely some Dickel sourced in here, mixed in here. It's not super strong, but that almost medicinally cocoa-y note that I kind of talked about last week, it's there. But to me, it more comes out in the cocoa. I don't get that weird vitamin-y-ness that I get from straight Dickel product. It's blended in very well. But like I said, some light apple, champagne grapes, something like that. Caramel, strong caramel bomb in there as well. Little alcohol-y. It's twingy on the nose. Again, fresh crack right out of the bottle. Little hot for 100 proof on the nose, but like I said, I would be happy to give it a week. I'm very curious, Ben, as well, to see what it's like in about a week. Smells very well balanced though. Nice layers in there. I'm actually very excited to taste this. Cheers, everybody. Ooh. That is nice. Wow. So I smelled the Dickel on the nose. God damn it. I smelled the Dickel on the nose. This is why Dickel's the worst. It's not because of the taste or the flavor or whatever. It's because you can't say it without sounding ridiculous. Dicklish notes. I need a minute. Damn you, George Dickel. Why couldn't you just be George Franklin? Franklin whiskey. Franklin, Tennessee whiskey. God, it would have been so much easier. I mean, come on. Dickel. Anyway, all this to say. Oh, sweet mama jamma. On the palate, even if I got a couple of those notes on the nose, on the palate, it's blended in very well. Nice caramel. A lot of black pepper and like baking spices on this. Some almost like vanilla clove. Almost Christmassy kind of notes. Scorpion, don't you do that. Don't you do that. I see that. Chat, behave yourself. Behave yourself. We always lose. See, if you guys join, cheap plug of my own, if you join the Single Barrel Club, you can hit me with all these jokes all the time in the Discord. I check that stuff all the time. Really well balanced vanilla, caramels, standard bourbon notes for sure. A little bit of cocoa. Less of those champagne grapes. The nose is a little bit more light and fruity. Where the palate is far more spicy and bold. This would make a really good cocktail whiskey. Now, for $55, maybe you don't want to put it in cocktails. I get it. But it is readily available. It's a really nice blend. It's 100 proof. There probably is those age ranges in there that Eric was talking about. Probably, I mean, if there is older George Dickel product, sounds better when you say his first name too. We've seen a lot of that in the market. It's probably in that 10 to 12 year range, balanced with maybe some younger Indiana or Kentucky bourbon or something like that. So this is a really nice, great, neat. I think it could be good in several cocktails. I think it could be really, really nice. Yeah, the palate is nice and bold. That's the biggest thing that I get. It is a bold, strong, spicy palate. Nose is a little bit more, I wouldn't call it fruity, but there's a little bit of those champagne grapes, a little dark fruit, but green apples, things like that. Uncle Nearest, 1856. They have a couple editions coming out, and they are coming out with new stuff all the time. And honest to goodness, most importantly, Black and female run business in the whiskey industry, which I think you can't overstate enough. You know what I mean? You really, really can't. That's so important. I really can't wait to see more and more of that. The first black owned distillery in Louisville just opened with a small group, which is awesome. So more representation, more inclusion, more people from all kinds of walks of life getting into the whiskey industries. I really, 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 really want to see more and more of it. Back to the main thing to close it out. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fun one tonight. Glad we got to travel down to Tennessee a little bit. Just a quick trip down to Old TN to try some non-Jack Daniels and non-George Dickel products. Yes, I added George again. Non-George Dickel, non-Jack Daniels product. In fact, we saw the genesis of Jack Daniels with Uncle Nearest 1856. And we've seen the future, both in that and in smaller distilleries like Chattanooga. Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee bourbon has a very, very bright future, I think. We've also, for so long, have associated it with just Jack Daniels. And if not that, then it was George Dickel as a primary sourcing location, right? So the fact that this and many others, there's an entire Tennessee whiskey trail out there now. Much like the bourbon trail, there is a Tennessee whiskey trail with a lot of great young bright craft distilleries coming out to try things. It's very, very cool. I am looking forward to the history. I think the distilling history of many states is about to blow up. Texas, Illinois here. I think Ohio is going to see a resurgence. Indiana is going to grow far beyond MGP. Kentucky, of course, has 1 million. Tennessee's got tons now. Places like Georgia, even maybe like the Carolinas, stuff like that, I think are going to start popping up more and more. The Northeast is coming back. The Hudson River Valley, New York, Northeast whiskey. Bourbon might be booming and cresting or whatever you want to say, but American whiskey in general is just starting to explode. And I am excited to see it. And there will be many single barrels. So one more cheap plug. I'm going to throw it into the chat. There's the info for the Patreon. One more cheap plug. Join the Barrel Club, $5 a month, and you get to be a part. If you live in one of 30 states that we can fulfill, you can join us in helping pick barrels. You can join with us on chat. I do extra articles for Patreon, revisiting things in my closet, old rare things that I thought I liked and I find out later that I didn't. Articles like that. So check it out. Join us. It's a lot of fun, and there's going to be some really cool single barrels coming out, like the new Riff, which won't be sold in stores. That ain't selling in stores, you know what I mean? You won't have any chance of getting that unless you're in our club. So, thank you everybody very, very much. Another episode of Wrestling with Whiskey Weekly. Too many W's, but too much fun. I just made that up on the spot. You guys are awesome. I will see you next week with another episode of this very show. Until then, cheers. Explore other options for bourbon and whiskey, and always, always, always be wrestling with whiskey. See you guys on the next one. Bye.